There are places on Earth that look small on a map, but hold the world together. The Strait of Hormuz is one of them. At its narrowest navigable point, the shipping system is funneled into lanes just a couple of miles wide in each direction, inside a waterway roughly 21 miles across. And through that bottleneck flows the energy that keeps cities lit, factories moving, planes flying, cargo ships sailing, and supermarket shelves stocked. In 2024, about 20 million barrels per day of crude oil and petroleum products moved through Hormuz, along with about one fifth of global LNG trade, much of it from Qatar. That is why a single decision there, a mine in the water, a missile over the horizon, or a political order to halt traffic would not stay in the Gulf for long. It would travel almost instantly into the price of fuel, food, freight, electricity, and everything built on top of them. And the truly unsettling part is this: the world does not need Hormuz to be fully closed or for the damage to begin. Markets do not wait for tankers to sink. They react to fear, insurance rates, rerouting cost, shipping delays, and the possibility that tomorrow might be worse than today. In a global economy built on tight schedules and just in time delivery, uncertainty can be almost as disruptive as destruction. That is what makes this tiny strip of water one of the most dangerous pressure points in the modern world. 1. The first shock would be psychological, not physical. If even a few tankers were threatened, insurers would raise premiums, shipping companies would hesitate, and traders would start bidding up oil before supply had actually disappeared. Economic data and IMF research on oil shocks show the same pattern again and again. Energy price spikes spread outward into transport cost, inflation, wages, and employment, especially in oil importing economies. In plain English, that means the first thing most people would notice is not a naval battle. It would be a number on a gas station sign changing faster than expected, airline tickets becoming more expensive, and delivery costs quietly creeping into everyday prices. Think about how that domino effect works. Oil jumps, diesel follows, trucking gets more expensive, grocers pay more to move food, online retailers pay more to ship everything from furniture to phone charges. Factories pay more for plastics, chemicals, packaging, and heat. Airlines pass on fuel surcharges. Then central banks, which may have been preparing to cut interest rates, hesitate because inflation is rising again. So a crisis in one narrow waterway can end up affecting mortgage payments, hiring decisions, and the price of a vacation on the other side of the world. That is the hidden power of choke points. They turn geography into inflation. 2. Not all countries would feel the pain equally. US consumers would notice it, Europe would notice it, but Asia would be hit first and hardest. The US Energy Information Administration estimates that in 2024, about 84% of the crude and condensate moving through Hormuz and 83% of the LNG went to Asian markets. China, India, Japan, and South Korea were the top destinations. So when people ask, who would suffer most if the oil stops? The answer is not abstract. It is the industrial core of Asia, where imported energy feeds manufacturing, transport, and power systems at enormous scale. That creates a second domino effect. Asian buyers start scrambling for alternative cargoes from the United States, West Africa, Latin America, or Australia. Europe then has to compete harder for those same barrels and cargoes. Poorer importers get pushed to the back of the queue. Spot prices rise, shipping distances increase, freight rates climb. The result is not just expensive oil. It is a global bidding war for replacement energy. And in bidding wars, the richest buyers usually win first, while everyone else absorbs shortages, blackouts, or painful subsidy bills. 3. International law says one thing, military reality says another. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, straits used for international navigation are subject to transit passage. and that passage is not supposed to be impeded or suspended. On paper, that means Hormuz should remain open to international shipping. But law is only as strong as enforcement. A state does not need to legally close the strait to make it unusable. It can threaten ships, lay mines, harass crews, seize tankers, jam navigation, or create enough risk that commercial traffic stops on its own. In other words, the difference between closed by law and closed in practice is where the real danger lives, and that is where military doctrine becomes brutally simple. To keep a choke point open, navies do not need perfect control. They need to reduce risk enough for commercial shipping to keep moving. To disrupt it, a weaker actor does not need to win a naval war. It only needs to make passage feel too dangerous, too expensive, or too unpredictable. That is why mines, fast attack craft, drones, coastal missiles, and tanker seizures matter so much in Hormuz. They are not necessarily tools for permanent closure. They are tools for temporary paralysis, and temporary paralysis can be enough to trigger the full economic chain reaction. 4. Can't the oil just go around? Not really, at least not in full. Some Gulf producers do have pipeline alternatives that bypass Hormuz, especially Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but the available bypass capacity is limited compared with the total volume that normally crosses the strait. The EIA's point is critical here. Large volumes move through Hormuz, and there are very few alternative options if the strait is shut. So, yes, some barrels can be rerouted, but not enough to make the problem disappear. This is where the supply chain domino effect becomes visible. If pipeline bypasses can cover only part of the missing exports, refiners still receive less crude than planned. Some will pay more, some will run lower, some will switch grades and lose efficiency. LNG buyers may also be forced to scramble for replacement cargoes, especially if Qatari flows are disrupted. That can push up gas prices in countries far from the Gulf, which then affects electricity costs, fertilizer production, industrial output, and home heating. The average person might never hear the term Hormuz bypass capacity, but they will notice when utility bills rise and the cost of goods starts moving with them. 5. Even the best case response is still painful. Governments have tools. Strategic reserves can be released. Navies can escort shipping. Diplomats can pressure for de-escalation. Markets can draw on stored inventories. But those are shock absorbers, not magic solutions. They buy time. They do not erase the vulnerability. And when a crisis drags on, even reserves and rerouting start to look smaller than the market they are trying to stabilize. Military escorts can reduce risk, but they cannot make every ship captain fearless. Reserve releases can lower panic, but they cannot permanently replace a major export corridor. The purpose of these tools is survival and stabilization, not a return to business as usual overnight. So what happens if the oil really stops? In the first hours, markets surge on fear. In the first days, shipping costs jump and energy traders scramble. In the first weeks, fuel, freight, and industrial prices start feeding into broader inflation. In the first months, governments face ugly choices between subsidies, tighter monetary policy, slower growth, and diplomatic concessions. And if the disruption lasts, it stops being an energy story and becomes a full spectrum economic story, one that touches manufacturing, politics, elections, and the basic question of how resilient globalization really is. That is the deeper lesson of the Strait of Hormuz. Modern life feels vast, digital, and decentralized, but underneath it all, it still rests on a handful of physical corridors, pipelines, ports, cables, canals, and straits that can turn the whole system fragile in an instant. A phone in your hand, a package at your door, a flight on your calendar, food in a refrigerated truck. All of it depends on energy moving through real places on the map. And sometimes one of those places is just 21 miles wide. If there is one takeaway here, it is not just that Hormuz is important, it is that our world is more connected and more breakable than it appears. The global economy is not a machine with infinite backups. It is a network of narrow margins, strategic shortcuts, and assumptions about peace that usually hold until suddenly they do not. If you want more grounded analysis on the fault lines that could reshape the world, from shipping choke points to border crises to great power rivalry, subscribe for more.